Thanks for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News. This week, I'm Maya Trabulsi, and coming up, a wrongful death lawsuit involving the U.S. military. We talk to the mother of a local woman who was murdered by a former Marine who shouldn't have had it done. Plus, healthcare workers in the South Bay say something's got to change. KPBS reports on the fight for better pay. And more from our special series on public art in San Diego County. See the artistic flourishes for the new Live Well Center in Choyes View. And we start with a familiar scene playing out just on the other side of the border. Hundreds of migrants are relying on the kindness of strangers to endure a makeshift outdoor camp. They're being kept there by Customs and Border Protection. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis talked with them about the uncertainty that they're facing.
It's written all over their faces. The tired, hungry, desperate huddled masses, forced to sleep outside in a makeshift migrant camp near the border, just south of San Isidro. More than 300 migrants, including many small children, have no protection from the elements.
La noche pues el frío y los mosquitos, los zancudos que no nos dejaban dormir.
Maria says the frigid temperatures and mosquitoes kept her and her one-year-old son up all night. She's been at the camp for 2 days and still hasn't been told when she will be allowed to leave.
Si yo hubiera sabido que fuera así, pues no me vengo, la verdad.
Had she known just how miserable this would be, she says she may not have fled her home. She asked that we not use her full name. Migrants told KPBS that Customs and Border Protection gives them some water bottles, cheese, and crackers. Everything else comes from volunteers in San Diego and Tijuana. Adriana Jasso is with American Friends Service Committee.
Right now we're estimating about anywhere from 300 to 400 people waiting in between the two fences.
Volunteers pass food and other supplies to migrants through small gaps in the border wall. They have blankets, medicine, diapers, menstrual pads, and even phone chargers. All things that migrants are not getting from Border Patrol. Jasso says people in the camp come from all over the world.
We have people from Cameroon, we have people from West Africa, we have people from Northern Africa, we have people from different Asian countries, including Vietnam and some parts of China. We also have people from Jamaica, from Brazil, from Peru, from Belize. We just met people from Afghanistan, a big family with several small children.
Many are asylum seekers, fleeing persecution back home. Nancy is an indigenous woman from Ecuador. She says discrimination is rampant. She also asked that we don't use her full name.
Hay racismo para indígenas, hay racismo, bastante racismo.
It took Nancy and her husband 2 months to get to the U.S. border. She prays to God that their suffering ends soon.
Muy triste, cansada, estoy en camino ya 2 meses. Y aún no paso todavía, pero confío en mi Señor.
Customs and Border Protection did not respond to questions from KPBS, including why the migrants are being held in these conditions. Back in April, the same thing happened. Border Patrol had put around 400 migrants in a makeshift camp between the primary and secondary border walls. The Homeland Security Committee in Washington, D.C. is currently investigating that incident after congressional Democrats filed complaints.
Families with white bracelets.
Around 11 a.m. today, Customs and Border Protection removed some migrants from the camp. Officials prioritized families with small children, leaving the vast majority of migrants outside in the camp. Jasso says volunteers will continue to be out there every day. She encouraged other San Diegans to help out.
If people are moved by the images and the faces that we have been seeing for the last week or so, they are free to come and see for themselves.
Volunteers are asking people to donate small fruits like oranges and apples because they can be passed through the border wall very easily. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And Supervisor Jim Desmond, whose district covers much of North County, is not happy with the federal government dropping off more migrants at local transit stations this week. He says 500 people are among the latest to be left with few resources. And part of a statement issued by Supervisor Desmond reads, "This isn't humane. This isn't compassionate. The federal government is failing in its obligation to protect the people of San Diego County. This system is broken and puts our region at risk. If the federal government wants to process asylum seekers, it must provide adequate resources to manage people entering our area." The family of a Navy corpsman gunned down by a former service member is taking the government to court. They say the killer, who was forced out of the Marine Corps for mental health issues, should never have been able to buy a gun. The case spotlights problems that the military has sometimes had, failing to report disqualified service members to the FBI's gun background check database. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer has more.
Petty Officer 3rd Class Devin Rideout returned to her apartment in suburban Oceanside after her shift at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton. It was a Friday in 2018, just before 4 p.m., and the 24-year-old Navy corpsman took her new puppy Chip out for a walk. When she returned, her upstairs neighbor, a man she didn't know, was waiting outside her door, and he was holding a revolver.
She really enjoyed being in the Navy. She enjoyed her job immensely. She loved helping people.
Her mother, Leslie Woods, is devastated by the loss of her only child that day. She says they spoke on the phone every day, and Devin planned to become an occupational therapist after the Navy to work with veterans.
I think she had 2 more years left from her reenlistment, and then she was going to transfer to a graduate school.
The man who shot and killed Devin Rideout was a Marine deserter who'd been arrested in 2016. He was diagnosed as schizophrenic, suffering from delusions and hallucinations, found incompetent to face court-martial, and forced out of the service. The schizophrenia diagnosis should have landed the man, Eduardo Areola, on the National Instant Criminal Background Check System used to screen gun purchases. But the Defense Department didn't report him. So when Areola went to an Oceanside gun dealer to purchase a 5-shot revolver, nothing came back.
In this case, it came into the database, and there was nothing there.
Eugene Iredale represents Leslie Woods in 2 lawsuits, one against the federal government and another against the state of California. He says the law is clear. Areola should not have been able to buy a gun.
No additional law was needed to prevent the death in this case. All you needed was compliance with the law that has been in effect for over 30 years, the Brady Act. And that's why we have such a powerful case.
For years, the Pentagon Inspector General has faulted the military for violating the law and failing to add disqualifying personnel to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System, commonly called NICS. The most well-known case was that of former Air Force Airman Devin Kelly, whose 2012 domestic assault conviction should have landed him in the FBI's system. The Air Force failed to report him, and in 2017, Kelly killed 26 people in the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs, Texas. Lindsay Nichols is the policy director of the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence.
So the military has a long track record of not reporting this information when it should. I'm going back to the 1990s when the background check system was first established.
In 2020, the Inspector General found that after the Sutherland Springs shooting, the system improved. Previously, the services reported disqualifying criminal information to an internal Pentagon manpower component, but the information didn't always get to the FBI. Now, the service branches submit it to the FBI directly. But that 2020 Inspector General's report looked only at whether service members' criminal convictions made it into the background check system. It didn't investigate whether mental health diagnoses made it into the system like they should.
The military exists to protect and defend our country from acts of violence. So the requirement that DOD properly report to the background check system for gun purchases directly fulfills the very purpose of the military.
Rideout's killer was sentenced to life in prison last year. In July, a federal judge denied a government motion to dismiss her family's lawsuit. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Local healthcare workers are speaking up in favor of a plan that would phase in a $25 per hour minimum wage for their industry. Health reporter Matt Hoffman tells us how the Chula Vista City Council is looking at the idea themselves.
Discussion of a draft ordinance to bring a $25 minimum wage for healthcare workers packed Chula Vista City Hall Tuesday. Some healthcare workers say that base pay would be life-changing.
I work another 25 hours doing a second job just to be able to make ends meet. It's really hard to be able to live here in Chula Vista. As a single parent, I've lived in my car.
They call us heroes, or heroes works here, but we're just laugh about it. What's becoming a hero? They're not giving us anything.
And I live in low-income housing. I just applied for food stamps.
Opponents say the increase in pay could have some unintended consequences.
So if approved, this ordinance will negatively impact health care programs and services that this community needs and deserves.
The board chair of Sharp's Chula Vista Medical Center says the hospital has been operating at a significant loss for the last 5 years. She predicts this year losses will exceed $70 million.
In the absence of additional revenues, we will be faced with some difficult decisions, including program reductions and service closures.
The proposed ordinance in Chula Vista would increase base pay for healthcare workers to $25 an hour starting in January, while Senate Bill 525 would phase it in, and some health facilities would have more time than others. For hospitals with a high government payer mix, current revisions wouldn't see a $25 per hour base pay until 2033.
One of the things about that state proposal that to us makes more sense is the idea of some kind of phasing in plan. We're still not sure how it will be funded or how it will be paid for. There is no real plan for that.
In its latest version, SB 525 states that proposed city ordinances or ballot initiatives for health worker minimum wages like this one in Chula Vista would be nullified if the bill passes. But that's not deterring supporters.
And I'm just going to point out that I think it's comical that we have CEOs sitting behind us that make millions of dollars and workers that make as low as $17 an hour, fighting to make ends meet.
The Hospital Association of San Diego and Imperial Counties estimates that the $25 per hour base pay would increase annual expenses by $20 million for Chula Vista facilities.
I've yet to hear one healthcare speaker come up here and say, we don't want to pay our employees of what they deserve. But it's got to be thoughtful and well thought out.
Hospitals and clinics are calling for an economic impact study to be done. Ultimately, a majority of council members agreed to move the item forward for a hearing next week, knowing that if SB 525 were to pass in its current state and be signed into law, this proposal would be moot. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
There are plenty of ways to follow the work done by the KPBS Newsroom. One way is to sign up for our newsletters. Local headlines and arts coverage are some of the topics you can have delivered to your inbox daily. You can find out more at kpbs.org. San Diego police still enforce a curfew for those younger than 18, despite research showing it's not effective in reducing crime. KPBS reporter Katie Heisen spoke with someone who says it might do more harm than good.
You have all walks of life that are here.
Arthur Soriano was a teenager in City Heights in the late 80s, early 90s. He says at the time, the community had a lot of trauma and few resources.
Everyone was fighting for their lives.
These were the years when politicians, including then Senator Joe Biden, promised to be tough on crime to stop quote-unquote super predators. This myth that more and more youth were committing violence without remorse.
And Madam President, we have predators on our streets.
Soriano says City Heights youth feared the police, who he says only came into the neighborhood for things like curfew sweeps and immigration raids. So they ran.
Hey, the police is coming. Let's run. Let's get away.
He was a latchkey kid.
I was raised with a single mother. She worked 2 jobs. Cleaning homes.
He says he had no father and no other family here, and sought out others who would validate him.
I needed a way out, and how I found my way out was becoming part of gangs.
At that time, he says he was more of a gang wannabe. At night, his friends liked to gather in a quick corner parking lot. Most times, he says, they weren't doing anything wrong.
We were just hanging out and talking smack to each other and laughing and giggling.
But it didn't matter. The city of San Diego has a curfew law. Kids under 18 can't be out without an adult between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., with few exceptions.
They'll come in with their little vans and wagons and just do raids.
Soriano's first arrest was for curfew.
And while they were doing curfew sweeps, they got me, they grabbed me.
They discovered he had a stolen bike, too.
At that point is when I began to get wrapped up in the system.
He went to juvenile hall just for a few days before being put on probation. But he says it was the start of a cycle.
For most kids, our way of solving it was just running until we would get caught.
The interactions fed into his identity as a gang member. He would eventually go to prison for 23 years. He's been out for the last 11, and now works with youth caught in the same system.
Hope, right? And I'm a beacon of that now.
San Diego police stopped punishing curfew violations with juvenile hall or diversion programs in mid-2019, but they still enforce it. There were 141 curfew arrests last year. They detain the children and call their parents, return them home, or to the police station for pickup. An SDPD spokesperson says they enforce curfew to keep children safe and make it less likely that they'll commit crime. But research is almost unanimous. It's not effective. That's according to a senior researcher for the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, Mike Males.
Curfews function as devices to waste police time, taking law-abiding youth off the street and creating antagonistic relationships between police and youth, and really not accomplishing anything.
The research doesn't seem to shape San Diego policy. At one point, the city accounted for 40% of all curfew arrests in California. Black and Latino youth make up more than 3/4 of the arrests in San Diego. Males says racial discrimination is the point.
A lot of this is just frankly racial in intent. It's to get Black and Latino youth off the streets and out of the public where they're frightening mostly white patrons of gentrifying areas or suburbs.
He says teens actually have a lower than average crime rate, and it's been going down in recent decades.
We found that when police apprehend youth for curfews, 99+% of the time, the youth that they apprehend was not doing anything wrong.
Research shows youth being in public during curfew hours actually helps reduce crime. Less empty streets, more witnesses. Soriano suggests an alternative to curfew, youth drop-in centers that could be open late night year-round. Soriano helped run extended youth programs during the summer, and he was surprised by the demand.
And we were like, man, these kids, they're not going to stay with us for 5-6 hours, right? Like, they're going to want to go back home and get into what, kids get into. And no, like clockwork, from 12 to 6.
Youth drop-in centers were voted down in this year's city budget. City council members will re-examine the budget next spring. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
Some of San Diego's youngest residents got a lesson this week in helping those who need it thousands of miles away. Education reporter MG Perez tells us about the exceptional donation drive started in a second-grade classroom.
Give yourself a big pat on the back. Rock and roll strong.
Shelley Cricket shares her passion for the ukulele with her second-grade class here at Wegeforth Elementary School in Serra Mesa. Hawaii's most well-known instrument also provides these students with a reminder of what is happening there now, cleanup and recovery from the devastating wildfires last month. Miss Cricket is so passionate about educating her students, she's almost lost her voice.
I wanted my second graders to learn compassion, empathy, and feel like what it would be if you went to school the next day and your school was burned down. There you go, $2, $3.
Just over a week ago, math lessons in this class took on a much deeper meaning as students and their families started collecting spare change to help Hawaiian children in Maui.
$1 gone here.
Miss Cricket has longtime ties in Hawaii, owns property on the Big Island, and spends a lot of her vacations there.
I like the spirit of aloha, and I like to live aloha, and that's just being kind to everyone.
Already more than $700 in coins and other money have been donated, and these students are calculating and accounting for every penny. The rest of the school has joined in, and now the effort includes collecting new school supplies for the next several months. All of it will be sent to the children who need it most.
It's just being a good person for helping some people in need.
It's because they've lost a lot of things and they might have become homeless, I don't know. They need money to buy stuff. So that's why we raised a lot of money.
Even though the palm trees of San Diego are 2,500 miles away from Maui, the connection is strong. And Wegeforth Elementary is creating community there, too.
It really was on fire, and there was no escaping it, and people were coming up here covered in smoke, and it was horrific.
John and Johanna Stockham are trusted friends of Miss Cricket. Their home survived 6 miles north of the fire zone, and they've been working for weeks to help students of the Catholic Sacred Hearts School in Lahaina find places to keep learning, like a covered parking lot and unused church spaces. They will make sure every dime and school supply coming from Wegeforth Elementary gets to the children who need it now. Public schools hope to open in these temporary locations by Halloween.
If we can connect them, really connect the kids one-on-one and allow them to write back and forth and learn from one another, I think we're taking the education way outside the classroom.
Kids helping kids with the Aloha spirit.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
MG Perez, KPBS News.
San Diego's MTS Transit Service says it's bringing back its free ride day. It's happening on Wednesday, October 4th. People will be able to ride MTS buses and trolleys at no cost. And the same goes for the coaster and for the Sprinter trains that's covering parts of North County. And this comes during a time of elevated gas prices, with AAA putting the local average at more than $5.50 per gallon. San Diego County has Live Well centers. They're buildings that provide everything from vaccines to probation services to community meeting rooms. A new center in San Diego's Choice View neighborhood also has a large display of public art. And KPBS's Laura McCaffrey has more.
The art installation Light of Passage hovers under a skylight at the County of San Diego's Southeastern Live Well Center. Hand-cut pieces of 4 different types of glass are attached to stainless steel wires, representing the nearby Choyas Creek. It's a sunny day, so the glass creates shadow play on the wall and floor below, splashes of blue, purple, and yellow.
I came up with a sort of a general concept that went out to the public, to the community for feedback. During that period, they've expressed their desire to see a lot of colors and something that gives hope and optimism.
Kaori Fukuyama created the art.
I wanted to use materials that really sort of shines and reflect off of our beautiful sunlight.
Light of Passage is one of many pieces of public art at the new Southeastern Live Well Center. Organizers of the center's art program say the pieces selected were based on community member feedback, an attempt to create a building for the community. The Tubman Chavez Center used to be where the Live Well Center stands now. In October 2021, construction for the 65,000 square foot facility began. The goal was to combine several resource buildings into one. Live Well centers are meant to provide social and health services to San Diegans. They're designed to be one-stop shops, aiming to prevent many visits to different buildings for access to various services. When it came to installing art in the building, the county gathered community input and then used a public art committee to make selections. Barbara Jimenez, Community Operations Officer at the county, said it wasn't hard to get feedback.
What we heard directly from the community, that this is a diverse community, and that having the opportunity really to reflect the diversity through art was really important.
100 artists submitted proposals to A Call for Art in spring 2022. Art was purchased from 33 artists, with 14 commissioned to create pieces especially for the building. There's installations, statues, paintings, a meditation garden, and more. One of the community requests, diversity, is seen in Francisco M's piece Crisol, meaning melting pot in Spanish. It consists of panels with ceramics and textiles. It's located in the stairwell under Fukuyama's installation. Visitors see a new panel every few steps taken. Eme says the textiles are from different cultures in San Diego.
This work is very non-personal, meaning that I did very little treatment to the textiles. I'm pretty much respecting the original design.
And so each of the flowers celebrates our community here.
Art consultant Leah Goodwin wanted the building to feel like a healing place.
There's evidence-based design principles that I use from my decades of putting art in hospitals and creating healing environments that are at play here. Even though it's a public health center, people still may not be having their best day. And we, so as a public art consultant, we looked at ways to find touch points to create beauty.
Fukuyama hopes that visitors find that beauty from her work's light and colors.
I'm hoping that if some people visit here more than once, then they see the changes throughout the day, throughout the season, and notice little things that changes around us.
Laura McCaffrey, KPBS News.
And there will be an open house and resource fair at the center on October 14th. Members of the public are invited to tour the facility and see all of the art. And this story is part of an ongoing series about public art in the San Diego region. And you can find more of our stories at kpbs.org/publicart. We hope that you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us.